and welcome to podcast 53 of the Relationship Restaurant. We're so delighted that you could be joining us once again. The Relationship Restaurant, Poppy and I do, Poppy and Jeff Spencer, if we didn't make that really clear. We're all about heart-healthy communication, and today's topic is going to be getting into narcissism, and we have a special guest, lovely lady who has recently made her way out of that pathway of being in a very challenging, toxic relationship with a narcissist and has made it out, and we'll be working and talking with Stacy today.
Before we get to Stacy, though, we usually hear the term narcissist bandied around in conversations. You know, we're talking about relationships, toxic relationships. He or she is such a narcissist, right? And so what exactly is a narcissist? So we reached out to our colleague, Dr. Craig Malkin, who wrote the fabulous book called Rethinking Narcissism. And Craig is also a clinical psychologist and lecturer at the Harvard Medical School. And in his book, he shares his narcissism scale that he developed, saying that there's a spectrum, a narcissism spectrum, that at one end is the narcissist and the other is the egoist, which we'll explain shortly. So Malkin really unpacks some of the myths around narcissism that many people believe, that a narcissist is a person who has grandiose ideas and brags about themselves. But he actually explains that there are quiet or shy narcissists. And in his book, he shares how we can spot them. So when we talk with Stacy later, she will reveal to all of you how she was able to identify and recognize when she was the egoist in a relationship with a narcissist. So the egoist is traditionally a people pleaser. It's somebody who grew up maybe uncomfortable with hearing praise or compliments, and they don't really like or need to be the center of attention, which is a perfect opposite for someone who's a narcissist. They easily accept blame when things go wrong, even though it was without their locus of control. They didn't know what was going on. Narcissists will generally prey upon those people who will validate their self-importance. And so they're always looking for someone who's very vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
And
vulnerability seems to be a key part of this. We've seen this with multiple clients that have gone through these relationships, that they often were found at a time when they were very vulnerable.
Right. And that maybe they're just off of a relationship, or a family member has died, or there's an illness or stress, turmoil, crisis of any kind. The egoist will come right up there, and they will deny their own needs, and they will place the needs of someone else instead of theirs. So they're a perfect match for the narcissist that wants to come out there. And so Malkin challenges that some of the myths around narcissism is that there's a healthy degree of narcissism, which was at first counterintuitive to us.
Poppy and I were discussing this earlier.
What? How can it be healthy?
I think it's kind of just a positive self-image, right? That's the kind of the healthy aspect of it.
Right. But most of our national attention, of course, is on unhealthy
all the dark sides that Stacy got to enjoy.
So whether a narcissist is either overt in their things that they're easy to identify, they have one thing in common, according to Malkin. They bury their normal emotions like fear, sadness, loneliness, and shame because they're afraid they will be rejected for having them. And we can't underscore that enough, because that's something.
So they don't show any of these vulnerabilities.
They cannot. So that's why the egoist is a perfect person to have around, because he or she will validate those things and not talk. Their desire to please is so great that they won't delve deep into, hey, what's really going on with you underneath there? These undesired feelings that you have, these unacceptable feelings that you're having. And so that's why the egoist is a perfect mate for the unhealthy narcissist. Mm-hmm. Okay, so Stacy came to us, and she is going to share with us some of her experience living a life with what she believes is a narcissist. So welcome, Stacy.
Thank you.
We always say that narcissists are brilliant at charming and reeling people in. So how did you get charmed and reeled in at the beginning here, Stacy?
Well, he was extremely charming. He was younger than I was. And when we first met, he seemed to mirror everything that I wanted in a partner. So everything that I would say is something that he wanted to give back at that time. If we would stay up, talking till 2 a.m, and we would take walks along the lakes, and he would call me his princess, and he said he was there to be there for me always. And he talked about how important family was. He paid attention to what my morals and my values were. And he tried to mirror those and tell me that that's exactly what he was looking for in a partner. So everything that I appeared to want is what he had to offer at that particular time. Kind of like put me up on a pedestal, and even, said he would go to church with me every Sunday and that he would believe the same things that I believed. And so he kind of brought me in, reeled me in, so to speak. And then from there, once he had me, and once I made any mistakes, that's when kind of the fall of everything happened.
It's incredible, Stacy. Poppy and I were just reviewing some of this book, and you almost in a textbook fashion described what his book, the mirroring, the compliments, the putting on the pedestal is like this textbook applications that Craig Malkin speaks to in the book. And it's incredible that you are nodding right along with that.
And if I could just interject for a second here, there are several warning signs for spotting and outing a narcissist. The first one is displaying emotion phobia. Like, I don't want to talk about my feelings. And if you talk about yours, I'm going to be really uncomfortable. And so the narcissist may use anger or redirect the conversation somewhere else to get you off from talking about those unacceptable emotions that they don't, especially around fear. The second one was placing people on a pedestal.
Absolutely. He would use either anger or boredom. He would act like what I was talking about was boring to him.
And I think the other warning sign that Craig Malkin talks about in his book, Rethinking Narcissism, is fantasizing that you're twins. So there again, that mirroring, that, oh my gosh, I'm the same way.
I'm just like you. I like all the same things.
I'm just like you.
Right. Perfect soulmate.
Yes, we love the same thing. I mean, Jeff and I, we love to say that we're soulmates too. But we have healthy differences and we have different opinions, which makes that soulmatedness a little bit more exciting.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with having lots of,
Yes,
right. We have our own identities.
Identities.
There's nothing wrong with having lots and lots of things in common that you enjoy. We're not saying that's an unhealthy thing. If it's all part of an act that someone puts on just to reel you in, that is an entirely different thing.
So in growing up, would you describe yourself as a people pleaser?
Absolutely. I used to call myself a chameleon, and I was so proud of it. I was so great at going into a situation and being exactly what somebody needed. So if they needed me to be cheerful and happy all the time, if they needed me to be serious and have a conversation, lend an ear, whatever it was, I was that for them. I never thinking about maybe what I needed at that point. It was all about the other person and what they needed.
So you were, as we defined earlier, the perfect foil, the egoist that he was looking for.
Right. It always amazes us because we've worked with many, many clients who have this same attraction. It's like, how does the narcissist find these vulnerable people? It's amazing to me. I even call it like an eighth sense. It's not even a sixth sense or a seventh sense. It's like this uncanny ability to sniff out this weaker emotional state that somebody is in.
How did your ex find you?
It's interesting. I was at the last second, I turned to go to a happy hour with some girlfriends, and everyone in my group knew everyone in his group except for him and vice versa. And they introduced us and we started talking. And the first thing I asked him was, because I thought, I'm just not into this anymore. I'm a little bit older. I said, do you even go to church? Do you have a job? Because I knew he was younger. And I started asking him all these questions. And I'm sure that by the time we got done talking and he heard that both my parents had had cancer and my father had died, I think he thought in his head, I've got somebody here that I can
manipulate.
Yeah, manipulate.
And that is the thing with a narcissist, right? Is that they want to dominate, manipulate. They will use their charming ways, their beguiling ways to attract that person that has maybe just suffered a loss or suffered challenges. And they're able to intuit that and instinctively will prey upon that person. So we call the narcissist an emotional predator as that. And then what attracted you to him? Was it the charm? Was it his interest in you? Did he use some of that twinning that Craig Malkin talks about? Like, oh yeah, same with me.
He did use a lot of the twinning, but some of it was even, he used a little bit of his, I came from a small town, I'm not super smooth. And he kind of used that at first. He didn't always know the right word to use. He'd use a word where I'd look at him and say, have you not, look in the dictionary, this is the word you should use instead of that word. And I kind of taught him a lot of that. So he used kind of this acting as if he was like, I was helping him out in that way versus just being smooth.
Right.
He would use kind of some of his weaknesses to make me believe that he would never manipulate me, because here's this small town guy, graduated from a class of very small, under 100, and was just this hometown next door neighbor boy that I could trust, not realizing as it went on that other things would, that the answer would really come if I had paid closer attention.
Well, and that's what Malkin talks about in his book is, okay, you got a little bit of twinning. He put you on a pedestal for sure. You're teaching me, oh my gosh, you're so amazing. So walk us through some of the red flags that may have appeared that maybe you didn't see or you didn't want to see. And then when you first acknowledged that, hey, something feels off here. And we're certified in Myers-Briggs, so we always like to see when people notice that. Is there a sinking feeling in their gut, in their stomach? Is it a thought you have? Tell us a little bit about that.
Interestingly enough, his were very small at first. I was older by 6 years. And he told me not to tell any of his friends that I was older.
Oh, okay.
And it started with these little secrets of don't tell anybody that, don't let them know that that's the case. And then it was like saying little things about my friends, like they don't treat you very well. They kind of use you. But he was using me. But he knew that I was like, he'd go, you're just so nice. And he'd say it like it was an ugly word.
Yes.
And it's like, but I don't want to change who I am. And I have a hard time changing who I am. So when he said that, and then he'd say, well, that friend's just using you. He was doing it as a small way of isolating me from all those people. Because I started to drop all those people out of my life because he thought they weren't treating me right. Here's this great guy that's, valiant and doesn't want me treated badly by my friends. And yet he was doing it himself, but he did it in such a small way that I didn't realize how much I had nobody else but him.
Right. We talk about that.
There's isolation.
In our and alienation, right? We talk about that in our writings about how it's like a slow drip. You just don't notice it. The drip doesn't make any noise,
until the bathtub's filled up.
And then it's filled up. So when did you start to?
There were a couple things right before we had our kids. And he had told me, well, if I see you have this child, I'm no longer going to be attracted to you. That's what all my friends say. And he was going on and on. And so then when the boys were born, I found out finally that he was cheating on me. And I confronted him and I kicked him out. And he asked me, begged me, please, 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 let's get back together. So we went to counseling. And the first couple sessions were okay. And he was listening and I could tell he didn't want to really go again and he didn't want to. And he said, well, she said, I think you need to do some on your own first. So he went by himself and he came back and he said, she's fantastic. I'm learning how to speak in front of large groups.
Oh.
What?
I'm like, what does this have to do with our relationship?
Yeah, what's that got to do with us? Right.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with us. But the thing is, at the time, he knew that I was in such a position. I knew what it was, but I was so afraid to go out on my own with these two little babies and to be on my own that he talked his way back in and I let him. So at that point, I knew that there was something wrong, but I thought maybe I could change him because he said just enough.
Right.
He didn't say much, but he said just enough to make me think that maybe someday if I could be enough, he could change instead of him changing.
These, I know we talked about it when we chatted with you the other day too, about these morsels.
These
nuggets. You get these little nuggets, these little things that just keep you just enough to keep you in the game.
Right. And if you saw somebody else's relationship and you saw it, you would say, what are you thinking? Like, why do you think that that's so great that, he's getting speaking lessons?
Yeah.
It made no sense. But at the time I was, the fear makes you overlook the other. And it makes your brain kind of trick you into thinking, well, he did say something nice. Maybe if I just am a good enough person or thin enough or funny enough or whatever it might be, that he will change the way he's acting towards me.
So what were some of the things that indicated to you that he was displeased with either your looks or your behavior or things you said? What were some of the telltale things that he was displeased? How did he express that displeasure?
If he thought I gained a pound, he would always grab my stomach because he knew that it made me feel like I would then start looking at myself thinking, oh, I'm getting fatter, or I'm getting, and I could be like 2 pounds overweight. He would make that issuance. And yet he didn't allow me to go work out at gym. He had the gym membership, but I wasn't really allowed to have it because that cost more money and I wasn't making enough. So I wasn't allowed to spend it.
So he used money as control.
Definitely money is control. And I worked full time and I took care of the kids full time, but he made more money. So he always used that as his control of, he could go buy a Mercedes or a Maserati, but I had to have a family car and he drove the family car when I never rode in the fancy cars. I wasn't allowed to because I felt as though I didn't present or make him look good enough to ride in the car with them.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, this is so
And
sad.
he wanted you to be in top shape, yet he wouldn't let you exercise to do it at a gym.
Yeah, I had to do it at home or he'd make me so anxious that I didn't look good that I didn't want to either. So I quit even questioning him because I was so afraid that I wasn't good enough that I didn't want anybody to see me when we were out doing that. So my anxiety, I pulled inside and kind of like almost a little bit of a hermit.
Mm-hmm. Right.
The other thing is that he would point out everything that I did wrong. And I got to the point where I would say, I'm sorry, 50 times a day, to the point where I knew it sounded stupid. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry you forgot your golf clubs. I'm so sorry you did this. I'm so sorry I put the mail there. It was apologizing for absolutely everything, even if I wasn't even near whatever it was that happened.
For anything that went wrong, you took 100% blame and responsibility.
Absolutely.
How was it parenting with your kids? Without going into too much detail, with your children, were you on the same page as parenting, or did he criticize you as a parent as well?
He definitely criticized me as a parent. He didn't want to do anything, so it made it very easy for him to blame me if anything wasn't going well, because he didn't really do anything. He would take a nap with them, with the babies when they were little, or he would do something fun that we would go to, but I was 100% involved.
The caregiver.
In them, taking care of them. We had one that needed extra care, so it was a lot of that. And then he made me very nervous because he would get very angry at the little things. My son splashed him in the water, and he took my son and he held him under the water.
Oh my
I
God.
stood on the beach with the other one screaming to him. It chokes me up even now because
Oh my gosh.
I stood on the sand, and I have the one child that I can't let go of because he has special needs, and I'm yelling to him to let go of this other one. And when he finally lets him up, he's like, he splashed me. And I'm like, you held him under the ground. He's like, you go up and you stand on that sand, and the sand was hot. And I remember feeling so helpless, and yet I was mad at myself. I'm like, this is my child. I have to stand up for him because I can't do this. Those were some of the things when I finally was like, I have to stand up. I'm like, no, I said, you go stand in the shade over there and I'll be right there with you. Because I knew that he was doing these things because he was angry, but he was taking it out on them. So then, of course, I tried to be more perfect so that he wouldn't do it to my child. And one day, my 10-year-old said to me, he said, Mom, you're just a puppet and Dad has the strings and you do whatever he says.
Wow.
Yeah.
That was an epiphany.
And that was the day that I called up the lawyer and I filed.
Good.
Really? So was the son pointing this out to you? Was that epiphany for you?
Because I thought before that I could control it.
Yes.
I could keep it all together, that I could keep this family because I didn't believe in divorce and nobody in my family had divorced and I didn't want that to be for my children. And then I realized the damage and that my son was going to turn around and do this to a woman someday. And I thought, I cannot allow this anymore.
Okay, I want you to repeat what you just said because that's a page out of our own book, so to speak. I didn't want my son. Say that again.
I didn't want my son to treat another woman that way.
Yeah. And it's so much. We say this so often to our clients.
That's what your children will learn.
What are you role modeling at home? You know, we're going to stay together for the sake of the kids. It's like, okay, so, and what are they learning?
You know, we have this conversation so often. People, we have to make it work. We can't get divorced. You know, that's just my family, my religion, whatever that is that you're saying is the basis of your thought. We can't do that. But in the same breath, you're willing to let your child be raised in this horrific scenario where the father is willing to even, do frightening acts like you just described of holding him underwater for the simple mistake of splashing his dad.
Right. And unfortunately, it wasn't the only time he did it. He did it one other time in front of my mother. He held him under the water in the pool. This was during the divorce. And so it obviously was something that part of you is concerned too, that you don't want to leave him alone with them. So you're thinking, well, if I'm there, at least I can control it. But I think that some of the anger dissipated when I left the situation as well.
So walk us through a little bit about how when your son's words sort of created that aha moment for you, with like, okay, I need to do this for my son or my children. What steps did you take? What was the first thing you did? You picked up the phone and called a lawyer? Did you talk to a friend?
I got a counselor, and then I picked up the phone and got a lawyer. And, it was a journey. It was going to the attorney and, the first day versus the last day. The first day I walked in and I shook and I could hardly talk and I could hardly ask for what I needed and I didn't know what to do. And then by that time that I left that, I felt so empowered. That was my being empowered to no longer, I think I've mentioned to you before that once you know you're a victim, it's no longer okay to be a victim because you're allowing yourself to be and you have to take control of it because it's your fault. Once you know you're a victim, it's your fault if you don't do something about it.
Beautiful.
You don't reach out. And it doesn't mean you have to do it alone.
Right.
It just means that you have to do something about it and you have to find somebody to help you do it.
So were you always shamed by your ex when you reached out for help? Was that just like forbidden to reach out for help?
He told me if we needed counseling, we're over. And if you need it, you're just weak. And he would say to me, what, are you going to tell everybody that I'm emotionally abusing you? You're just so weak. You're just the victim. And he would use the very words that were true to make me feel ashamed that I needed it.
To mock you.
Yeah. So did you tell him you went to counseling?
No, I did not tell him I went to counseling. I kept that to myself until I filed, and it took me quite a while to file.
Of course. You have to get detox from all this stuff.
You mentioned that this is a word that we often speak to. You had every bit of your self-worth, all your empowerment had been taken away. And you're just a shell of your former self, and it takes you a while just to build up and get yourself empowered enough.
And reclaim your identity.
Yeah, that you can say, I can do this.
Right. Well, and I remember the best day was after I filed and the divorce wasn't over. And my son said to me, we were out all together and I was acting silly. And he said, Mom, I've never seen you this happy. He said, I never knew that you could just giggle and be so happy. You realize how much more that you damage your kids by not.
I think with people pleasers, it's really hard to do something proactively like that, to empower themselves, to get back on that path of empowerment for themselves. But when you see it for the teaching that you're doing and the messaging that you're giving to your children, it makes it a little bit more doable. I mean, you saw it as a chance for your children, so you were like, okay, I'm doing this for my kids. I may not be able to do it just for myself, but for my kids, I'm seeing the damage. I'm seeing the toxic relationship that's being revealed to them, and now I'm going to do something about it.
I also love what you said, Stacy, that your child saw you genuinely happy, and the child mentioned this to you and said, Mom, I've never seen you this happy. And what a wonderful thing, what a wonderful gift to give your child to show you're happy. And that's why we often, people say, I can't get divorced. I can't move away from this relationship. That's such a bad thing. But when your child is the one who tells you that you're a puppet, and then your child says, after you've made this bold step forward in your life, to re-empowered yourself, where you've been able to show this child great joy, and the child reflects that. They want to see their mother happy, and they want to see that great dynamic at play.
So, Stacy, one of the things that, as you went through this with your kids, what did you say to your kids when you made the decision to petition for divorce? How did you present that? Did you present it together or separately? I know a lot of our clients, and I'm sure our listeners too, would like to know, like, okay, so how do I broach this subject?
It's interesting because I would have wanted to do it with the two of us together.
Okay.
But at the time when I decided to do it, he actually talked me out of it once. And
Sure.
then I went back and filed a second time. So because he wanted to keep me there for the control, not for the marriage.
Right. Oh, that's it. Wait. That's way profound. I want you here so I can continue to dominate and control you, not for...
Not because I want you as
co-creating a marriage.
In a healthy marriage.
Yeah.
Correct. And in fact, he even said to the counselor we went to on one of the days, he said, well, we're in this business arrangement together. And I looked at him and my mouth dropped open and the guy was like, well, that's a complete surprise to her. And he said, well, we got married. We both got job increases. We had kids. I got another promotion. We moved into a bigger house. We moved in, and then we moved into another one, and then we moved states. And he, in his mind, this was like a business arrangement to him that he had never, he failed to tell me about it.
Right.
So when I actually sat down, and at that point, my son knew my ex had taken an apartment downtown because he said it was too far to drive between where we lived and where he worked. And we knew that it wasn't true. It was only 17 or 18 miles away. And my son knew that couldn't be the truth. So when I sat down, he really wasn't surprised by it, that I said, I'm going to file and you're still going to get to see your dad. And you're still going to get to see me. And we both love you very much. And I gave him that whole, speech.
Sure.
But he wasn't surprised by it. And I think it needed to happen because he said, well, Mom, you and Dad are always fighting. And it's funny because we never fought until I filed.
Interesting.
I always just did whatever he said.
Sure.
Well, that's because that you changed, all of a sudden you were taking control and you were now empowered. And that is the one thing that the narcissist does not want.
Right. So, that was something that I needed to do, obviously, to get out of that situation. But at the same time, I didn't want to say anything negative about my husband, soon to be ex. But the hard part is I also didn't know what to say as far as why are you not together now? Even though he said we were arguing. And I said, well, you heard us arguing there, but I couldn't tell my son all the real reasons why we were getting this divorce. So I chose instead just to say, we both love you, and say, when you're older, you'll be able to understand a little bit more of what's going on. But it's nothing that you or your brother did. It's nothing to do with that. And the two of us just need to move on.
I think you described that very well. That was a healthy description, an explanation.
There have been times when he was angry about things that his dad had said with his new wife that they had said against me. And it was very hard not to just say, well, your dad did this. So my biggest thing that I learned to say was, if you think those things are true about me, stop and take a look at what you know about how consistent I am in how I am around you. And I tell you the truth, and I always want the best for you. And I always try to do the right thing. And if somebody's in need, I jump in. I said, my actions are going to speak louder than anybody's words against me. So just always stop and say, would my mom really do the things that someone's saying against me?
Beautiful.
Wow, this is great.
I'm not 100% infallible and I make mistakes. I said, but I'm willing, if I make a mistake, I'm willing to tell you that. And I will always be honest with you in that way.
It's often hard for a narcissist to apologize or have remorse or even have empathy. Can you shed some light on that, where maybe something happened to either you or one of the children that there was a lack of remorse or empathy?
There's a couple things. I had one instance where I was telling him a story about a really close friends of mine, their sister who fell off of this climbing thing. The rope broke and she fell and she broke 23 bones in her body.
Oh my goodness.
And I was telling him the story and he goes, "Can you just hurry up? I'm really hungry."
Wow.
And I'm like, "Really? You just said that?" Like, it just wasn't even in his realm to like empathize or to understand or to put himself in that position of what had taken place.
Well, and that's what this Craig Malkin talks about in his books, is that the lack of remorse for, or the lack of empathy for someone else, is a way that the narcissist will shield and hide his or own unacceptable emotions. I don't want to be sad. I don't want to feel fear. I don't want to feel these things. And then they will act out by either becoming angry, impatient, bored, and blame you, the conversationalist, to either tell a different story that's not going to trigger, and I think that's the operative word here, is trigger these emotions that the narcissist works so very hard to keep way down deep. Does not want to reveal those, right?
I want to commend you too. I think you so wonderfully articulated your response to your son about what your ex was, denigrating you, and that I know Poppy, I'm sure, felt the same way too. You did a wonderful job of reframing that and putting it in a very different light of, showing your actions and your behaviors. I'm sure you've also done this where you've made it a great point in the contrary, the reverse, not to be denigrating, and also, I think we talked about this the other day with you, how you've been able to stop the angry outbursts when you have to have communication. So share with us some of those points you've given us.
Right. One of the things with him is that he would call me, and if I said or did anything that he didn't like, he would start to yell at me. And in the past, I would raise my voice and we'd be yelling across the phone, or I would be ready to cry. And finally, I just told him, you're not allowed to speak to me that way anymore. And if you are, I'm going to hang up on you. And so now, as soon as he starts to raise his voice or say something cruel or call me an awful name, I just say, I'm hanging up on you. And then I'll text him and say, when you're ready to talk to me in a calmer voice or in more respectful way, then you can call me back. Because setting those boundaries with them is really important.
Right.
Which you couldn't do when you were married.
No, absolutely not. I wouldn't even yell at it. I would just take it and be like, oh yeah, I'm ugly, I'm this, I'm that. Whatever he said, I internalized, and then would just try to change myself and be better.
Did he ever, I was just curious, did he ever go after your children as a way to, and I'm using air quotes here, punish you?
The only time that he did it more in a way of when we were going through the divorce, he would say to me that if I didn't do what he wanted and I didn't give him what he wanted, then he was going to say that I was an awful mom and that I had alienated him, and that he would make threats to take the kids away from me.
Right, which is, and we see this so often in our counseling with clients, that they come in and they're shaking, they're terrified that they're, my ex or soon-to-be ex is threatening this, and it's like, no, I promise.
He's going to throw me out of the house. He's going to take the children.
Yeah. But if you're, what I used to say, down a quart, if you're emotionally at the bottom of the well, you start to believe those things. You believe, oh my gosh, he or she has the power, they can do this. And so, unfortunately, we work with a lot of clients who are in this very toxic relationship where one person is a narcissist or requires dominance over the other and will use any means to get it, whether if it's not directly with you, the egoist, it's going to be through the children or a family member that's beloved, that they will use a way to get that so you shape up and get in line. It's a way to control you to get in line. Or maybe it's a friend. Maybe you have a best friend and they slowly started to chip away at that friend you have and criticize that person. And then they're not very trusting, or I don't like that person. I don't want you hanging out with that person. And so that's what Craig Malkin talks about, stealth control as a way to remove you from those relationships that were meaningful.
Most definitely. He did that with a few of my friends. I had very close friends that when they found out that he had cheated on me, the husband, when he found out I was taking him back, he said, well, he's no longer welcome in my home, knowing that would get me. And I said, all you have to do is apologize to him and I can have my friends back. He's like, why do I have to apologize to him? I didn't do anything to him. And it wasn't that big a deal to you. So
Yeah.
It wasn't that big a deal to you.
Well, he said it wasn't a big deal, but it was.
right. And I've never been back in their home. I've seen my girlfriend outside of their home, but that husband never let us back in their home. And that's when he wanted to move out of the state because he didn't want to be anywhere near. He wanted to pull me even further away.
Right.
Wow.
And that's
Well, I wanted to kind of ask you one last question. We tip our hats to you that you, first of all, just identified all this and took summoned the courage to get out of the relationship. And I know you've been out. You said when we talked to you earlier, 3 years you've been out and on your own, and you're able to now look back with great perspective. And how'd you get there, Stacy? How did you over these 3 years? What was the path you took to get this healthy?
Well, the number one thing is I went back to my faith and realizing that when I trust God, God shows me what true love is, and being able to see that in all relationships, to
Right.
put that first. Second of all, obviously I got in with, an amazing counselor, and not to be embarrassed. I'm very open about it because I found out that which we keep in the dark becomes evil, becomes shame. And
Yes.
so if we bring it to the light, there's no longer shame in it. And we find that we have fellow companions along the walk. And I've also started, I have so many women that have reached out to me that now are willing to share their story and don't feel that shame. They have somebody that knows that I have compassion for them, that they don't have to be embarrassed. Some of the things that I did that I should, I thought, who in their right mind would ever allow these things to happen to them? If I share some of my story, then they're not so afraid to share theirs. So that along the way, just brought me tremendous peace and learning just to trust myself again, and knowing that it's okay for me to be the same kind, giving person I am, but just to make sure that I'm doing it with balance, and that the people that I'm giving it to, if I'm doing it as a charity, then I don't expect a return. But if I'm doing it with a friend, then I need to expect it back with them.
This is wonderful. I know that in the writing of our book, 1 Billion Seconds, that we coined a phrase that seems very apt for you. We wrote, with complete vulnerability comes absolute empowerment. And I think that's what you did. You weren't ashamed to ask for help. You were able to surmount that challenge that your ex-husband gave you to say, no, I'm going to go seek help. It's not a weakness. It's a strength. I mean, I think it's a wonderful strength. And we commend you on your faith getting you through that. And hopefully you've reconnected with friends that were in the past that, you didn't feel you were allowed to maintain those relationships with. Hopefully you've reconnected with them. We give you a lot of credit going forward. You still share children. So if you could say one thing to our listeners about how you go going forward now that you're divorced, with your children, still sort of preserving the respect of their father, what kind of message or words would you give to your kids?
I think the best thing for others is to know that we want our children to know that they're loved by both a mother and a father. It's so important for them going forward to have that soft place to fall. So even if you're angry at that ex-spouse, knowing that that person still can give value to your child is so important in whatever way that they can give it. And obviously to tell our children that none of this was their doing, and that we can still love you from both sides. And that way you might just get even more love as we bring more people into this family, quote.
Yes, and I know also that with some of our clients that we've suggested is that when they've complained that the spouse isn't showing love, and you hit on something really well. You said he's not showing that the love has value. And sometimes it's up to us as ex-spouses to be able to sort of describe and expand on what that love is, even though it's not in the same way that our children want to receive it. They don't know. And so I know I've often found that with my exes is to show them, like, I think your father might, this is how he defines love. And if you could accept it as such, even though it's maybe not the same definition as either mine or what you have. And so I think that is like a really helpful thing.
Setting the bar at the right level.
And it takes the emotion out of it, and
well, and they're loving you as much as they can love anybody.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
As much as
So
they can.
you're getting the most of what they can give at this time.
Yes.
Well, Stacy, we can't thank you enough for everything you've shared, your openness, your vulnerability, and bringing all this story to us. And we know your stories can help so many others, and that's the whole reason we're talking today, is to hopefully pass this on so many other folks can learn how to deal with and understand a narcissistic relationship and get out if it's really bad.
And if it is toxic, please feel free to go on our website, poppyandjeff.com. That's POPPYANDGEOFF. And you can download your free emotional clock with a guidebook. And that emotional clock is something that we trademarked and developed to help us really kind of pinpoint those emotions that we have that are confusing us and getting in our way, and to address them once we identify them. It's a way to get to those challenges and obstacles that we have in our relationships. So we thank you, Stacy, so much, and for sharing your story, and appreciate and respect everything that you've gone through on your journey.
We wish you great luck, and thank you for being a guest on our Relationship Restaurant. Until then.
Thank you, Poppy and Jeff.
See ya.